Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional league, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Marcus Vargas, and guys, today, another jam-packed show. Now, before we get into our first topic, of course, I want to say I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys are healthy, safe, happy, stress-free. I know this has been, quite the challenging times we're living in here. Pretty rough, to say the least. Unprecedented, of course, but we'll get through it together as one. Just keep pushing along, keep doing what's right and what you got to do. All right, we are starting today's show with some must-haves, and must-haves for the 2020 fantasy football season, and the position we'll be starting with is running back. Believe it or not, I believe running back is the top position in fantasy football because, I think the potential for points that running backs can score is just through the roof, especially the pass-catching ones. You guys know me and my pass-catching running backs. I mean, I think it's just a standard. It's not even just a me thing. It's a universal thing. Pass-catching running backs are OP. If you don't know what that means, they're overpowered. If you're a gamer, you'll get the reference, but that basically means you want to have them. They help you win a lot. So starting off with running backs, yeah, I know, gasp. Quarterback's not the most important position. Yeah. All right. And the running back I want to start with is actually one that might surprise you, but I think I'm going to have my eyes on him a ton. It is Nick Chubb. He is PFF's number one running back last season. That's where they ranked him. They say he's been the best rusher in the NFL since being drafted, even in 2018. He's the only running back with a PFF rushing grade north of 90 over that 2-year stretch, and only him and Derrick Henry average over 4 yards after contact per attempt. Those are amongst running backs with 100 or more carries. So he's insane. He's a truck. He's a monster. He just is in an unfortunate situation in Cleveland. I think he certainly flies under a lot of people's radars, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that he's on the Browns. Think about it like this, too. Another reason to love him, he thrived in a very dysfunctional atmosphere. That team, when we watched the Cleveland Browns play, when we looked at Baker Mayfield, Odell Beckham, it was like a joke, right? When people, when you talk about the Cleveland Browns, you're talking about underperformance, underachieving, should have been better with all that on paper. But Nick Chubb, he was neck and neck with Derrick Henry for the league's rushing title. You know what I mean? Derrick Henry clearly ran away with that, no pun intended, last game of the regular season. But, Nick Chubb's a monster, and he certainly needs to be recognized. I think next season, right now he's being drafted, I think as RB9 with the 18th pick in drafts. So you certainly want to pay attention to him. Last season, he has 1,494 yards and 8 touchdowns on the ground, and hasn't missed a single game. Knock on wood, of course. Don't wish injury upon anyone. So if you need a reliable guy, he was a top 10 back last season. I think with Kevin Stefanski in the mix, he has potential to place even higher. I think he was RB8 last season. So keep your eyes on Nick Chubb, guys. I think he's going to give you guys a lot of bang for your buck. Now, the next guy I want to talk about on this list, Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders, because I don't think enough people are talking about this kid. Understandably so. I think it's because, the Eagles have run with that committee for so long, and people are worried about that. But I will say he's trending upward in ESPN Live mock drafts. He's RB11 when he was RB13, I believe, just last week. He's gone up plus 1.6 picks with the 22nd, I guess, overall pick, because it's 21.9, so I'm going to round that up. So that means you would be starting the third round where you could draft Miles Sanders, which to me, excellent value for that kid. A lot of work in the receiving game for Philly. 6 games last season of 44 or more receiving yards. So that's easy 4 points plus however many catches. Let's say that's 3 or 4 catches. That's 7 or 8 points automatically just from receiving. Tack on a receiving touchdown. Let's say now that's 14 points. You know what I mean? If he has 8, 13 if he had 3 catches, plus the yardage on the ground. So this is a very, very wise investment. I think you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck. Remember, he really didn't get, the starting job till about halfway through the season. And when he got it, he was very, very productive. So you guys need to pay attention to Miles Sanders. He's a guy I think is going to help a lot of guys win their leagues, but it's going to be pretty low key. Another guy I want to talk about, I haven't been not as high on him as other people, but Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon's poised to have a very good season next season. He's played like a top back, of course. He's on the Bengals, and so that hasn't really served him well. But with a refreshed offense, he is definitely poised to do something special. Now, he wasn't the best, fantasy football running back last season, but when we look at ESPN Live draft trends, he is RB13. 2 picks below Miles Sanders, and I think a lot of people have had their eyes on Joe Mixon as potential top 10 running back. Last year he was RB13. He had several huge games in the second half of the season, and I think that might be the reason why he's not higher. He didn't have the full great season, but I mean, after his bye week, you got 17, 7.9, kind of a dud, but 17, 27, 18.6, 9.3, and 30.6 for the last 7 or 8 games. So he can put in work if he can continue that momentum through the next season. Mixon's definitely a borderline top 10 running back, and I think if he can get involved more in the pass catching, that's going to serve him pretty well. So I think hopefully he can get involved in the pass game more. Going to bring up his value a ton. But Joe Mixon, another running back, you certainly should be paying attention to. And the next guy I want to talk about is a guy people aren't talking nearly enough about. He falls right in this sort of he's being drafted right around Miles Sanders, right between him and Joe Mixon. Austin Eckler, guys. Austin Eckler was the number 4 fantasy football running back. Wow, why is he all of a sudden not even a top 10 running back in most people's rankings? I mean, do we realize that even when Melvin Gordon came back into the mix, he didn't score less than 10 fantasy football points in a game? And he finishes RB4. I mean, come on, he had several 30 and 25 plus point games. Let's see, 39, 23, 29, 22, 25, 21, 31. That is 7 games with 20 or above points, and he had several games, even though he didn't get 20, he either had 15, 13, 12, 16, 13, 11, and 17. So Austin Eckler, guys, I think he's going to get a lot of work next season. Tyrod Taylor is not a guy who's going to be, pushing the ball all the way down the field. But I think, and I think that's going to help Austin Eckler. I don't think he's going to have the craziest, as crazy of a season as he had last season. But I think he still has potential to be an RB1. And I don't see why the dip in progression is projected to be so large. Dropping 8 spots to me is a bit crazy, and I understand. When you have guys like Christian McCaffrey, Saquon, Zeke, Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, it's hard to, where do you put Eckler in that place? But I think he has that potential, right? We can't draft every guy at a certain spot. You can't take everyone. So where you're at, if these guys are gone, this is a guy who can certainly put up top 10 numbers, and most of it has to do with the pass catching, because he is one of the better pass catching backs in the league. Certainly not getting enough recognition, probably because he's on the Chargers, who haven't done much recently, and because Phillip Rivers is gone, doesn't really have a QB. Offense might sputter. Who knows? Now, this next one I want to talk about, I don't know if it's a must-have, but it's certainly one you guys should keep your eyes on. Josh Jacobs of the Oakland Raiders. Now, the reason I say this is because Josh Jacobs missed a few games late in the season. He had some health issues, but I think he can bounce back pretty easily. He was in the talks. He was in talks for Rookie of the Year. I think he was Oakland's first 1,000-yard rusher as a rookie since who knows when. He had 4.75 yards per carry on 242 attempts. Very, very efficient now. Not huge with the consistency in fantasy football scoring, but I think he'll take a step forward next season and can definitely be, a fantasy football weapon. John Gruden has expressed a desire to target him more often, so if he becomes a full workhorse, is involved in the pass game, Josh Jacobs is going to be a top fantasy football running back. ESPN, pegs him as a top 12 fantasy football back, but I think he could crack the top 10. Of course, that's RB1. Basically, they're saying RB1 in a 12-person league. Very, very interesting here. I think a lot of people are going to pass on him. Right now, he's being drafted as RB10, but I think in drafts, you're going to see people, if Miles Sanders keeps drafting upwards, Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon, they'll take those guys over Josh Jacobs because they're going to look at his stats and say, oh, last season he was RB21. Why are we drafting him in number 10? Remember, you guys are going to be drafting with people who aren't as dedicated as you. I mean, unless you're in a league where everyone is dedicated and into it very seriously, you can take advantage of money leagues where not everybody studies this hard or researches this hard. I'm going to be real here, guys. Yes, there are those leagues full of football junkies, guys who do their research, guys who study up. But hey, just because people aren't too crazy about football doesn't mean they ain't putting in the same amount of money as you in the money league, right? So take advantage of that and make the right picks. Okay, next running back I want to talk about, I think this is number 5, if I'm not mistaken. Nick Chubb, Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon, Austin Eckler, Josh Jacobs. This is number 6, Kenyon Drake. I think he's going to be big next season because he was one of the hottest running backs last season, and he played half of a season. Right now, he's being drafted pretty high, though. I will say he's RB8. I'm not saying pretty high. I'm saying pretty high for this list. He's the highest on the list that I'm going to be talking about. But I think he has a ton of potential, and I think you're going to want to keep your eyes on him and where he's slipping to come draft day. I think this is a good spot for him, RB8. Let me check here with what he's going with, a 17th pick overall, which I think is pretty good. It's at the back end of the second round. I think that's great value for him. I did a couple mock drafts where I saw someone take him, with pick 10 overall. Thought it was a bit absurd, but I think he has that kind of potential. We saw last season he started to go off, like I said, towards that second half of the season. Very involved in the pass game. He had 50 receptions, 345 yards. Didn't have the receiving touchdowns, but that's going to change. If he can get 50-plus receptions again on the Cardinals, that over a whole season, oh yeah. Yeah, give me that. He had 4.8 yards per carry, guys, and 8 rushing TDs. I think that number is going to explode next season. He's certainly going to score more than he did last season and certainly place higher than RB17. I mean, it only makes sense. He didn't even crack 200 at carries like a lot of these other guys on the list, and I think he's certainly has a chance to be a top back. That is a ridiculous yards per carry number, one of tops in the league. So he literally could have led the league in yardage, had he gotten just a few more touches than say Derrick Henry or Nick Chubb. So Kenyon Drake, very, very important, and he's a pass catcher. That basically something. Do I need to say more? I think his is pretty simple. I really don't think he's going to. I need to say more. Excuse me. I'm like losing my mind here. All right, the last one here I want to talk about. One that's interesting. One that's going to be very, very. He's going to get picked. Very, very late because he's a rookie. J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins, I think, is going to be one of the more interesting picks in your drafts. I'd be very interested in where he goes. He is going so late, you basically don't have to pay attention to him, but he's going as RB 40 behind just about everybody. But where he is going, there are some interesting picks like Tevin Coleman, Marlon Mack, Matt Breida. Philip Lindsay is here. But J.K. Dobbins is going to be a stash, but I really think he's a guy you have to stash. I really, really think J.K. Dobbins, who has surged up plus 7 draft spots, is going to be super, super, super important. He's getting picked with the 112th pick overall, which is clearly in the very late ending rounds, of the draft. But, I don't think we should be just discounting him as, Mark Ingram's there. He's not going to get any play time. We've seen Mark Ingram in a timeshare before where he and the other guy were very productive. Don't you remember when he was on the Saints? Him and Alvin Kamara were both quality starting running backs for fantasy football teams. The Ravens are smart. They know Ingram's getting old. They know they can't have him on the field for every single down. This is the guy, I think, that they want to use for their 1-2 punch, and he just might surge forward and take that spot from Mark Ingram. So you definitely have to pay attention to him. J.K. Dobbins is going to be, I think, one of the steals of the draft, especially with how late people are taking him. So pay attention to these guys. These guys, I think, are super, super important. And with that, guys, we'll go into our first break. And when we get back, we'll move on to the next position of must-haves. Enjoy the break, guys. We'll be right back right after this.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. We enter segment number dos. And for this segment here, we're going to move on to must-have wide receivers. Makes sense, right? Wide receivers, to me, second most important position in fantasy football. You could argue that they're the most important position in fantasy football because of the PPR usage, but I think, running backs take the cake, but whatever, we're all entitled to our own opinion about it. Will not take any discussions that say any other positions are top, because that doesn't even make any sense. Quarterbacks certainly aren't, tight ends certainly aren't, kickers and defense and special teams, clearly. All right, want to move on to these must-have wide receivers because in most of your drafts, you guys are going to see the first round is going to be very, very running back heavy. I've seen a lot. I've seen several drafts even where only one receiver is picked. 1 to 2 receivers are picked in the first round. It's Michael Thomas and DeAndre Hopkins. That, is in line with the ESPN Live draft trends. Michael Thomas and DeAndre Hopkins are going 1 and 2. Devante Adams is going as a wide receiver 3. Now, I understand, okay, why am I talking about a wide receiver 3 here? And I said I wasn't going to talk about the clear obvious guys. I don't think Devante Adams for a lot of people is a clear and obvious choice. I think a lot of people are going to be taking a guy like Julio Jones and Tyreek Hill over Devante Adams. So I think where he's actually going to land come draft day is wide receiver 4, 5, maybe even 6, depending on who you're playing with, of course. I could easily see people passing on him for Julio and Tyreek, especially, video just comes out of Tyreek letting off the gas in the last 7 to 10 yards of a 40-yard dash and still running a 4.37. Seeing that kind of speed. But anyway, I think Tyreek's in line for a huge year next season. I could see why somebody might take him or Julio over Devante Adams. Julio's just a beast. We know he's arguably the best receiver in the NFL. So there's no need to argue his case. But Devante Adams is basically the only receiver on the Green Bay Packers. And just to give you an interesting stat from last season, yes, he only played in 12 games. Out of those 12 games, in 8 of those games, he scored 17 or more. 17 or more. It's very, very good. In the other 4 games, they were kind of duds. 7.6, 9.6, 11.1, and 8.1. But in the other games, he never dipped below 17.6 points. In fact, it's 17.6, 28, 19.3, 24.4, and then he ends the last 3 games of the season with 23.3, 22.6, 22.3. Now, I understand those, week 17 game doesn't matter. But some fantasy football playoffs are played in week 16. Weeks 15 and 16, he would have given you 23.3 and 22.6. So he is going to be valuable next season. He has a ton of red zone usage. I think he's only behind. Is he only behind? I think he's third. He was third in the league last season in red zone targets, and he missed 4 games. He is heavily used. They didn't get any wide receivers that are going to threaten him. And so Devante Adams, coming back fully healthy, is going to get slept on. He's going to fall behind a ton of running backs because a lot of people start to panic. They're going to see all those running backs flying off the board. They're going to be like, oh my goodness, I need my elite running back. I need my stud. They're going to draft running backs, and pass on this guy. Pay attention. Devante Adams is going to be very, very important for your fantasy football draft. Now, this next guy I want to talk about could be a guy who could be even more important for your team. Now, he's very, very different from Devante Adams because he's going to be accessible for a lot of guys. I understand that Devante Adams actually, he still is one of the elite receivers in the NFL, and someone might snag him much earlier than I'm anticipating. So, you might not get a chance to draft Devante Adams, but you certainly will have a chance to scoop up Terry McLaurin. They call him F1 McLaurin. He is a very interesting prospect because he finished as wide receiver 29 last season. Right now in ESPN Live Draft Trends, he's going as a wide receiver 24. And I think he's going to give you a ton of bang for your buck. The reason why, when Case Keenum and Dwayne Haskins were targeting Terry McLaurin, they posted top 10 passer ratings. Of course, that's only when they're targeting him, but he is outstanding. He led all rookies in receiving, and he's going right now in round 7, which I think is a great, great spot for him to go, a guy you're going to want to stash. He's going behind guys like DK, T.Y. Hill, and Keenan Allen, and I think he can definitely serve, he can be a serviceable replacement for those guys if you don't get to grab those guys. I really think next season he's going to take a big step forward. We typically see receivers take big steps forward in the year 2, year 3, so on and so forth. This is a guy I would definitely take a chance on. He's going to get a huge target share. He's going to be in a situation like Michael Thomas because who else is on that team, right? There's not really many people on that team. Yes, he's going to draw doubles, but, if Dwayne Haskins, and he has to, man, he has to. If he takes a step forward next season, yeah, Terry McLaurin's going to be very, very serviceable fantasy football wide receiver, easily at least a wide receiver too. So this is definitely a guy you're going to want to be paying attention to. I'm definitely going to have my eyes on Terry McLaurin because I actually drafted him last season just to take a chance on him. It's funny, I drafted him because I have a friend who is a fan of the Washington football team. Of course, I don't have a name right now. But I did it just to troll him. I was like, I got you guys as rookie. And, he had those first couple games. I was like, holy moly, this guy might be something. You know what I mean? He had 23 and then 17 and then 19. I think that was still with Case before Dwayne came in. He had a 26-point game, 24-point game late in the season. He has a lot of potential. Of course, he needs to stay healthy because he did not play, a full season. But, I think he certainly will wow some people next season, and I think he's going to be at least a wide receiver too. So keep your eyes on him, guys. He's going to take a step forward like we see many receivers do in their second year. And he's definitely worth the 63rd pick in your draft right now. Now, the next guy I want to talk about is another guy who's going in the 7th round, later in the 7th round, and that man is DJ Chark Jr. Reason I want to talk about him, he finished as wide receiver 17 last season, but right now he's being drafted as wide receiver 26. This clearly is a very good value pick because he is the best receiver on the Jaguars. Now, I understand why people think the Jaguars are going to suffer so much, but Gardner Minshew is entering his second season, and we're hoping that he can, take a step forward and not have a sophomore slump. I think Minshew is flying under a lot of people's radars. The Jaguars are overall. And I think, if they're behind in a lot of games, they're going to be throwing, and DJ Chark's going to have a ton of targets. Teams don't have to be good for, their fantasy players to be great. Right? So, look at the Panthers. There you go. So I think a lot of people are going to be sleeping on the Jaguars, and I think you should scoop DJ Chark. Again, a guy who's, everyone's going to have a chance to draft him. And, Gardner Minshew is going to be in his second year where they tailor the offense to him for a full 16 games. It's his team now. Doesn't have to worry about competition. Doesn't have to worry about the next quarterback coming off an injury and coming taking the spot. It's his team now. They'll build an offense around him, and I think DJ Chark is certainly going to benefit from that. We saw him do some pretty wild things last season. He didn't play a full season. I think he missed a game or two, but he definitely had some big games. I think that can become more consistent with Gardner Minshew getting better and stepping up. Now, the last guy I want to talk about today, and I know the wide receivers I picked guys who were more lower end on the draft spectrum because, I think, it's just a fact. The drop off for running back is much, it comes much quicker. It's a much steeper fall. So I think there are those guys you have to target because, you're going to get a bigger fall off quicker. But nonetheless, this guy I want to talk about to wrap it up here is a guy that I think a lot of people aren't talking about enough. Devante Parker of the Miami Dolphins. Now, let's not forget, this guy was wide receiver 11 last season. Right now, he's being drafted as wide receiver 27. I have no reason to believe that Devante Parker can't finish as at least a wide receiver 2. He finished as a wide receiver 1 in 12-man leagues last season and a top-tier wide receiver 2. So, Miami, it didn't get worse, right? And if Tua Tagovailoa becomes a starter and pops off, yes, I said it, pops off, we can see Devante Parker repeat again as a, top 11, top 12 kind of fantasy football wide receiver. It is weird because, he's not a rookie or the younger kind of guy. He's 27. He is young. And he had his breakout season, kind of late in his career, a little late. But he had some pretty big games last season. 21, 22, 23, 34, 20. Plenty of games. Very, very serviceable performances. Of course, they picked it up in the second half of the season. And that's what I want to pay attention to more. After week 8, here are the point totals. 15.7, 11.9, 20.5, 15.1, 34.9. He had a dud against the Jets, 4.8. Then he wraps it up 23.2, 22.1, and 21.7. If he can carry that momentum into next season, and Ryan Fitzmagic can keep bringing us some of that magic, He averaged 16.7 yards per reception last season, had 9 TDs. I don't think, those numbers are going to be as big next season, but I do think he can put up some serviceable numbers. He takes a dip, but I don't think he takes a dip to be drafted, wide receiver 27 in the back of the 7th round. I think you could get him maybe a round earlier, but if he's still available here, another guy you're going to want to be stashing, another guy you want to pay attention to, because a lot can happen in Miami. Listen, did anyone watching the Miami Dolphins last season believe that they could beat the Philadelphia Eagles? Did anyone watching Miami last season think that they could beat the Patriots in a game in which the Patriots could not afford to lose because they could potentially lose the 2nd seed, which they did, and arguably was the reason they got knocked out of the playoffs and didn't make a Super Bowl run? Now, I'm going to be real here. Side note, didn't think they were going to make a Super Bowl run regardless. Didn't think they were going to get through Lamar and company. But anyway, so this is a team that's, rallying behind Brian Flores and the change of culture. I think the offense isn't going to be as bad as a lot of people think. They're trying to turn it around, step up on defense, and help that offense out. We got to pay attention to Miami's offense. Another guy, they just got 2 solid running backs, and I think they're ready to change gears, switch it up on everybody. Excuse me. So pay attention to them. Pay attention to Devante Parker and the rest of the wide receivers I was talking about here. With that, though, let's go into our next break, and when we get back, we're unfortunately talking about the NFL canceling the preseason. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this short break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Alrighty, guys, welcome back. We enter this segment, unfortunately, having to talk about the coronavirus and the NFL. Okay, let's just get right into it. The NFL and the NFLPA agreed on some coronavirus testing terms that I want to go over before talking about some other stuff. I want to talk about it because it's basically a follow-up. I recently spoke about how the NFL was seemingly ignoring player safety, and we saw a bunch of the league's stars, a bunch of the league's top QBs, who are usually the biggest representatives of their teams, speak out about this and basically say, we want to play, but you guys got to keep us safe or this is not happening. The guidelines for how they're going to be testing has been released. So I kind of want to read it over and just go over it, give you guys my thoughts. So essentially, NFL players will be tested daily for their first 2 weeks of camp. Okay, cool. What I like about this is they say if the positive test rate falls below 5% after the 2 weeks, the league would then test players every other day. So then the transition, they don't have to do it every single day, because clearly if these guys are being kept with contact with each other, after the first 2 weeks, if they're, negative for all these tests, they shouldn't be coming in contact with anyone else. Other than the players that they have been around, or other than all the people other than the people that they were already around for the past 2 weeks. So that makes sense. However, if the positive test rate does not dip below 5%, daily testing will continue until it does. If the positive test climbs to 5% or higher at any point, even after that, they'll go back to daily testing. Dr. Alan Sills, who's the league's chief medical officer, stated, he says, this is ongoing work. There's no finish line with health and safety. I think these protocols are living, breathing documents, which means they will change as we get new info. They will undoubtedly change over time, which is what we usually see in medicine. Cool. I like that. I think there is no cookie cutter way to do this, and I think constantly changing and adapting to what's going on is important. Now, what I really like here too, after arriving at training camp, players and staff will be required to test negative twice before they're allowed to enter team facilities. I like that because there are, false negatives, false positives, and these tests aren't always 100% accurate. They must arrive on site, undergo testing, and then go home during their first 2 days at camp. If they test negative both times, they can begin working. The one part I don't like about that is about going home. I wish there was more of a and I don't know what going home means, but if this is a controlled environment, that would be best. To have someone go home, put them in contact with more people. They go home, say their loved one or relative goes out somewhere, is irresponsible, comes back home with it. You might be putting them more at risk. But anyway, if a player tests positive and has no symptoms, he can either return, to his team's facility in 10 days or come back after receiving 2 consecutive negative tests within 5 days of the positive test. If a player tests positive with symptoms, he can return after at least 10 days have passed since the first sign of symptoms or at least 72 hours have passed since he last experienced symptoms. The one thing I don't like here is I think everyone should be treated the same whether you have symptoms or not. I would like, these sorts of things to be handled like worst case scenario every single time. That's the way you nip it in the bud. That's the way you get things taken care of, and you prevent, constant spreads and, prevent a resurgence. As we've seen in our everyday lives, we've seen a lot of states and cities reopening, and consequently, we have seen things start to get restricted again and, maybe possibly closing down again. So I'm a fan of the treat everything as a worst case scenario. And be very, very strict. Coronavirus obviously was a big concern for players. Like I said, they went to Twitter, and the NFLPA released a statement. Our union has been pushing for the strongest testing, tracing, and treatment protocols to keep our players safe. The testing protocols we agreed to are one critical factor that will help us return to work safely and give us the best chance to play and finish the season. This article also says, despite new testing rules, the NFL and NFLPA have yet to reach an agreement on other issues. The league has not granted players a 21-day training camp acclimation period recommended by the Joint Medical Committee. Instead, the NFL has pushed for 2 preseason games while the NFLPA wants 0. Now, we do know, as of right now, the NFL has canceled the preseason. So, I don't mind the canceling. I did talk about the fact that I didn't mind canceling the NFL football season. I said, if that was something that had to happen, then, it had to happen, and that's okay. It does suck that it's finally here, though, and happening. It is kind of rough to think about. The fact that, we are basically one step closer to not having a football season. That's basically what that means. And, what bothers me is the NFL is not doing everything possible to be as safe as possible. I mean, we see the NBA doing even silly things where you see there's guys, how they set up the benches. When you're on the bench, you have to sit 6 feet away from your teammates, yet you are just passing the ball, touching the ball, sharing the ball, very, very close range, close quarters with those same teammates on the court, which seems kind of silly, but at least their attitude is we're minimizing as much as possible any contact unless it's necessary, right? And we're practicing social distancing unless we literally cannot because you're on a court playing basketball. And I think that that's the mindset that the NFL has to have. And unfortunately, right now, they don't. However, I think, not having the preseason games, which is, what the NFLPA wanted, is a small victory. Now, they're still pushing for that, acclimation period where players, can get their bodies adjusted to the physical demands of ramming into other grown men at very high speeds, trying to tackle them and get them into the ground. That makes sense. And that seems like a no-brainer, with a lot of, training camp, OTAs kind of stuff being limited. Guys can't just go back on the field with a, restricted, decreased training camp and perform the same as they always have. And I think this is the one thing that concerns me the most. They've also announced that there's only going to be, or they're like trying to work out agreeing on 80 man roster as opposed to 90, which means 10 less players can come to camp. They're also trying to work on a general agreement on they said that there's been a general agreement on voluntary and high risk opt out clauses and stuff like that, and they said there's a general agreement on stipends if games are canceled due to COVID-19. So that is very interesting. Of course, the numbers, the finances of that all has to get hashed out, and I don't know how much percent of a salary you're going to pay these players, but and how you work it out with the elites of the NFL, because clearly, paying someone 20% of their $20 million contract is a whole $1 million, and 20%, of $100,000 is much, much less than that. I'm not saying someone's making only $100,000, but, not everyone is making the same amount of money, and of course, other guys can afford, to take just a little chunk of their salaries as opposed to others. Now, what concerns me here is, and it should concern everyone, I'm concerned about the quality of football that our guys are going to be able to play. Because there's just a lot more than, just reducing the training camp time or not having the acclimation period. We have to understand that this is going to carry over, and we're going to see a lot more longer slow starts from teams than we usually did. And I think it's tough because, getting acclimated to your team as an undrafted free agent, as a rookie, there's a certain process that, happens, and it's not going to be able to happen now. And so we're going to see, and especially with no preseason games, I understand preseason games can be very boring, but what I love about the preseason is it's a warm-up. It's like it slowly gets these players ready for the NFL football season. I know some people some of the stars don't even play, but to get the rookies and undrafted free agents on the field to at least put on a show or test out how it is to be in the NFL, get on the field, get some playtime, show coaches what they can do. That's very, very important, because there's some guys who go on the field who just won't make the cut because they don't have, the team doesn't have enough space for them, but can get a deal somewhere else because of the highlights they've shown during the preseason. So, it sucks because a lot of people are going to lose their jobs who might not have, because now there is no preseason, and the coaches are going to have to make very, very tough decisions because, the practice field is not the same as game day. Of course, you want to practice how you play, but there's just not that same level of energy. When you're in practice against, your own teammates, it's not the same as going out on the field against your arch rivals, right? And so, the coaches now are going to have to be judging who they keep solely based on how they practice and not how they compete in a real game. And I understand the preseason doesn't count for anything, right? It's not anything too crazy. And it's kind of interesting that, we keep the records, like when the team loses, they're 0-1 in the preseason. I don't even understand, why we do that, but we do it. And, well, now we won't be doing it next season because there is no preseason. But yeah, just to, sort of extend off of that, to see that this finally happened. I talked about it. I said, I'm okay with it, like I've already said. But to see it happen now, it's kind of scary. Because back when this first started, I said, football's so far away. Hopefully by then, this will all be over. We'll have football. It's no problem. But man, time flies. Time flies for sure. And now we are very, very close to the NFL football season beginning. I believe, I don't know how many weeks is it until the NFL. Was it like 11 weeks or something like that? I actually want to check how many weeks we have left until the NFL. So September 10th, I know it's the Chiefs versus Texans to open it up. If we go, there's only about 1 week left in July, 4 for August. I said 11 weeks. Look at me. It's like 7 weeks, something like that, just about, until the season's going to start. And that is nothing. I mean, that is just nothing We're already about to be done July. Once we get through August, yeah, that's a bit scary because, with all these people going to the beaches, it's the summertime right now, and people are taking advantage of beaches and bars being open. They want to get their summer on. They want to go party. This stuff it's still spreading, and it's still spreading at an alarming rate at this point. We've been dealing with this for so long. Way back when this started, I thought definitely by now this would have been, much, much less severe, but the United States has really not done a good enough job. The people of this country, and man, I love you guys, but we haven't done a good enough job at containing this. And it sucks. It sucks because, we are a nation that's looked upon as one of the greatest nations in the world, but we just can't get a hold of this thing. And I hope we do, because like Drew Brees said, we need football. The players need football. The fans need football. Shows like this need football, right? And that's the thing that scares us the most, At the end of the day, if there's no football season, there is no GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. I can't come on here every week and talk to you guys about who you should start, who you should sit, who was in the top of the rankings, who's the best handcuff right now that running back got injured. So it's something that extends even more farther than just being a fan. It's something, much deeper than that. So it's concerning, but I'm hoping that the NFL chooses to do the right thing. I know that I know, they were recommending that the NFL do something similar to the NBA and sort of operate in a bubble, which I think would be fantastic. But that really hasn't been, the NFL really hasn't echoed, that sentiment. I think, what Richard Sherman says, he said that, the NFL is going to have to fight tooth and nail to finish this 2020 season. And I agree with him. I think this is going to be a rough season because, the NFLPA did report, I think it was 59 players have at some point, since this started tested positive for COVID-19. And, I can just imagine, it just takes one person. It just takes one person. We could be watching these football games, this is awesome. The Chiefs just played the Texans or whatever game you're watching. The Ravens are playing the Steelers and, after the game, oh my goodness, Lamar Jackson tested positive for COVID-19. The league just shuts down at that point, right? Any player, especially players who are constantly touching other players, touching the ball. I know the quarterback touches the ball every play, but if you look at, defensive linemen, who are Aaron Donald, let's say, test positive for coronavirus. He is constantly, every single play, coming in contact with another player with his hand, face to face, face mask to face mask. And I understand they have those guards, but still, there's holes in it for them to breathe. And so that is concerning. And I can't imagine how we have a football season at this point. It's scary. It sucks, but I would love for there to be football. But when I think of things like that, because it just takes one player to ruin the whole thing, one player to be irresponsible, to be sort of entitled. We've seen it happen in the NBA bubble, people breaking the rules. One person catches COVID-19 and it's over. So it sucks to think about it like that. It's very, very harrowing and, kind of sad, but it is what it is. And we just got to keep moving, keep pushing forward together. All right, with that, guys, we'll go into our last break of the day. And when we come back, of course, wrapping up the show for you guys. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this short break.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
guys, welcome back. We are in the last segment of today's show. I know, time really does fly, doesn't it? But to wrap up today's show, guys, we're going to do some other news, some talks around the league, random articles I may have stumbled upon. I'm liking ending the show like this, so it may become a trend. But anyway, the first thing I'm going to touch on is Mr. AB. About business, whatever you want to call him. I don't know what his other nicknames are, but he's back on social media, and he's apparently retiring yet again. He posted some tweets, and I'll read them here for you guys. The first one, I believe, said, "Is it time to walk away? I done everything in the game." Okay. Second tweet, "At this point, the risk is greater than the reward. Thank you, everyone who's been part of this journey. I sincerely thank you for everything. Life goes on, 84. Well, last time we saw you were 17. Then he said, after that, a couple minutes later, "I came, I saw, I conquered. Mission complete. Call God." Okay, well, if you haven't realized, Antonio Brown is a clown, a joke, and this here should be just treated as such, accordingly. He's just doing this to get attention. Clearly, Antonio Brown is clearly bored. The quarantine must be getting to him, and he clearly has nothing better to do than to tweet, just to, get his name in the headlines. Nobody really cares. So, for him to tweet this out is literally just, sort of him just, I haven't been talked about recently. He's done this before. You know what I mean? I think, I watch, if you guys watch Skip and Shannon Undisputed, Shannon Sharp, great guy, wise guy, and not like a wise guy in a bad way, a very wise man, has said this, when Antonio Brown's name dies down in the media for a bit, he has to post, he posts about something, and, to get attention, to make headlines, and, it usually works because, the NFL media and reporters are always, kind of right on the hook for it. And as soon as he dangles the bait, they snag it, they go for it. But, this is something nobody should really care about. We're talking about it here, of course, because I fall for it too. I got to talk about it too. And unfortunately, that's what fuels him, right? Giving him the time of day. But, he's just irrelevant at this point, and he's trying to keep himself relevant by announcing his retirement. Remember, I think it was last season at some point, when the Patriots let him go, he's like, "I'm never playing football again." But, did we really think he was going to come back to the league anyway at this point? In my head, Antonio Brown was gone. His career was over. So, regardless of the amazing stats he put up in Pittsburgh, I think he's second all-time in basically every stat. I think he's first all-time in yards per game, which is incredible, which makes this even more sad to think about because, man, Antonio Brown at one point was my favorite receiver in the NFL. I'm going to admit that. Just watching him play, run his routes. He's not the biggest guy, but could always get open, find space, get up there and moss people. He put on shows in Pittsburgh, and it just sucks, what happened to him. All the drama going to the Raiders, the videos, the drama at home, the horrible allegations against him, and, where he's gone, it sucks. But, you'll find articles about him on every major news outlet basically that covers sports, and that's what he wants. So we're giving him what he wants, unfortunately, but he will eventually become so irrelevant that he is a meme already. So at some point when he's like 40 years old and we know he can't play anymore, he'll be just that, and there won't be any potential return for Antonio Brown. I know some teams don't have the door completely closed on him. Should he somehow get signed to a team, then, of course, we'll cover that here because he is going to be fantasy football relevant, unfortunately, because I don't think he deserves to play in the league anymore, but it is what it is. Antonio Brown retiring yet again. Whoop-de-doo-dah. No one cares, my man. All right. We move on to the next topic. I know that sounded kind of harsh, but, man, He acts like a child. All right, here we go. We're going to talk about the Washington team because I want to talk about some team names that are not proposed to them, but there are some options that a lot of people are talking about. And I want to just give you, I guess, my favorites or my rankings. Now, I'm on the NFL looking at this article here, and, the writer lists some very interesting names that have been swirling around social media, picking up steam. And I'll give you the names of the ones that I like. Braves. Of course, I agree with him here. He says that is a no-go. The Hogs was a suggestion because naming the team after the famed offensive lineman that helped power them to 3 Super Bowls seems like an interesting idea, and there's already a built-in affinity for the name, but there's far too much potential for ... different interpretations. So yes, there's a lot of ways you can go with that. Certainly wouldn't be a good look. So I don't like that one. Take that one off the list for sure. Now the Red Hawks. This one's interesting because Miami of Ohio changed their name from, guess what? The Redskins to the Red Hawks back in the 90s. This is one, they're not going to do this because they'd have the same name as a college team, but 2, because they would look even stupider than they already look because a college team changed its mascot from the Redskins to the Red Hawk in 1996. You want to know why? Outrage because the name was disrespectful to Native Americans. A college team. NFL team couldn't lead the way there. He talks about the Senators. That name is lame. I don't like that. Also, are we big fans of Senators? I don't know. It's kind of whack. All right. Next category he has here, Americans, generals, or other military name. He says one of the other teams in Washington is named the Capitals. Naming the team for the Senate or the House of Representatives seems like a horrendous idea. But it is based on our nation's capital, so some people are going to suggest naming it either after the country itself or one branch or another of the armed services. Personally, I think teams should be much more creative than this. You can name a team the Americans or generals in any city in the country. Very, very true. He said it should be specific to Washington in some way. Now, the one idea he had, which I thought was really dope, was naming it the Bravehearts, Warriors, or Renegades, something like that. I really like the Renegades because, as he mentioned, you could keep the R part of the logo and the branding. And he says you could actually probably keep the spear logo, which looks dope on helmets. I've actually seen variants before this whole thing started of just a spear on the helmet, and it looks very, very cool. You could take the feathers off of it so that you're not. Actually, you could keep the feathers on it because you could keep the sort of a Native American vibe. Renegades. It's still a cool name. But the overall favorite, the best name change they could possibly make here is the Red Tails. He features it here, and he actually links the fact that he links an article or an image of a logo a fan made that won a design contest several years ago. It is awesome. It looks really, really dope. It's a circle with a fighter jet in the middle, and it says Washington on top, Red Tails on the bottom of the circle. The plane has DC on it with a star. And like we've talked about, it's a nod to the planes flown by the Tuskegee Airmen, the all-black squadron of fighter and bomber pilots who fought in World War II valiantly for this country, and they were the first black aviators in the military in the United States. 3 of the first 5 admitted airmen were from Washington. so that even connects the name to the city. You can keep the R because it's Red Tails. Of course, you're going to rebrand the logo, but I think this is just, could there be a more perfect time to, give a nod to African Americans in this country who have done so many amazing things? This seems like a no-brainer, and if they don't name it the Red Tails, I'll be disappointed. If their team isn't the Washington Red Tails after all this, honestly, it'd be very disappointing. I think the logo concept would be dope. I've seen a fan make awesome uniform variants where like the red is not, it's still in that kind of maroonish red. Super, super dope. But the Redskins got to take this chance, man. They got to take this chance to do something bold, do something awesome, and, give a nod to the African Americans who have done so many amazing things in this country, but haven't received enough recognition for. Because, doing this would, honestly, I would really, it would garner a lot of respect from not only me, but a ton of people. Because when you look at these things, and this sounds bad when, coming out of my mouth, even when I think about it, African Americans don't get enough recognition in this country. And I don't think, it sucks to say, is what I meant. And, I don't think anyone, and this is sad, would expect the Redskins, to name their team the Red Tails as a nod to African Americans, which sucks, right? It should be at this point a no-brainer. Like, oh my gosh, yes, great name. They're going to do it. They're going to name it the Red Tails. But we haven't received, that notice. That hasn't been reported. And I don't know why, because it's clearly the fan favorite name. It makes sense. The design would look awesome, and a lot of people, they need to do something that caters to the people. After the scandals that have come out of there, the racist logo and name that they've had for years and years and years, and have just ignored, requests to change on. They ignore the requests to change it. I mean, they need something big here, and something bold. So, Red Tails, best name by far. And to wrap up the show, guys, I want to talk about the NFL. The report that came out that the NFL is planning to allow social justice decals on helmets. This is super, super dope. I really, really like this. This is awesome. And the names, of course, they're going to send out a list of names to put on the helmets, but they want the players to provide the names and initials to be on that list. I think this is super, super dope. Super, super cool. Of course, I guess you can't just let people put any name on there. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't just say, any name, but, if, a victim of, racism or violence or a representative of equality, change, all that stuff. But whatever, they want to have a list, but I'm glad they're letting the players, make the list. But, this is super, super cool, because the league really doesn't do this very often. They don't allow, customization of the gear. They fine people for wearing custom cleats, and yes, they have the crucial catch thingy. And they let, them wear the cleats that one time during the season where, you wear your cleats for your cause. But it's not something that's very normalized in the league. And I really, really think this is cool, because there are so many NFL fans, unfortunately, who are against this sort of thing, and they want football to just be football, when that's clearly impossible, because the guys who are out here playing football are human beings who live in this world, who see injustice, who see inequality, who experience the racism, inequality, injustices that, the people they're going to be representing with the helmet decals experienced, because so many people in the league are African American, or identify as black. It's just, this makes sense. I really, really like it. Super, super cool. To the fans who, don't want this to happen, or will stop, quote unquote, stop watching, because a lot of people just like to say it just to say it, because they'll be there on Sunday watching their favorite team. But goodbye. We don't need you. We don't want you here in the NFL as a fan. You should be supporting this, supporting equality, supporting the fight for justice, supporting the fight for humanity, because we're all human beings. Your favorite player is not some robot they made in a lab to come play football and just be your entertainment. He's a human being with a family. He's a human being with kids, a wife, brothers, sisters, mothers, grandfathers, grandparents, and a lot of these players you love and you adore and bring your city and state glory, unfortunately deal with racism, have dealt with racism, have lost loved ones because of racism. Okay, so this is much bigger than you and your privilege and you not wanting to see these people fight for equality on TV. So with that, guys, I want to thank you for listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I want to ask that you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all social media at GSMC_F football. Leave a comment, leave a great review, or a bad review, but of course keep it constructive. Let us know what we're doing that you like. Let us know what we're doing that you don't like. We really, really appreciate it. And with that, guys, I want to wish you a good night. Stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy. Keep doing what you're doing to, stop the spread of the coronavirus so we can have a football season. And have a good night. We'll see you here next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.